Is it at all possible that when it comes to sports, we're pushing our kids to the brink of exhaustion and burnout? And does our cultural emphasis on sports result in misplaced priorities and even idolatry? These are important questions we must ask ourselves if we desire to bring glory to God in every nook and cranny of life. We'll be talking with former Major League pitcher Jeremy Affeldt about his story, sports, family, and managing our priorities on this episode of Youth Culture Matters.
From the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding, this is Youth Culture Matters. If you're a parent, youth worker, educator, counselor, grandparent, or anyone else who cares about kids, we're glad you've joined us for this practical, informative, and hope-filled podcast. This is a place where together we talk and think Christianly about the rapidly changing world of today's children, teens, and young adults.
Another week, another podcast. It's Walt Mueller here at the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding. And as always, I'm with the healer.
That's right. That's what my name means.
I wondered if you knew that, Jason. I looked up what your name means. It's the healer.
That's right.
That's
right.
Yeah. How did you know that?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Oh, because I think names are really important. And so I obviously, if I know what my son's names are, and what they mean, I should know what mine does.
Jason,
means. But I've known that for a long period of time.
You know what my name means?
Walter. Let me think. It means I've done.
You're
this
making
before.
something up, aren't you?
No, I'm
You're
not.
I
really am not. I'm trying to remember. No, what does your name mean?
Ruler of the Army. That's
a scary thought.
Yeah, that is.
That is a scary thought.
You know, and I looked up your names too, Chris and Kenton. Do you know what your name means, Chris? Christopher, right?
Follower of Christ.
Follower of Christ.
Christ bearer.
Sure.
Christ bearer. Kenton, do you know what your name means? Quit looking it up. Don't Google it. Do you know what it means?
It means royal chieftain.
He looked it up.
No, I don't know what site you're at, but if you translate your name, it means King's Farm.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Which and what happens at a farm? Things grow on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's just think about that a little bit.
I will say this. I mean, the way
King's
that
Farm.
we named our kids was just what we really feel the Lord was laying on our heart with regard. And a lot of times it was characteristics. And but when we were going through names for our firstborn, I won't say the name because I don't want to embarrass any of our listeners, but it meant cabbage farmer. And I thought, well, I don't think that's what the Lord's laying on my heart is for us to have a cabbage farmer.
Cabbage farmer. Well, I have to think about that. Yeah, everybody look up what your name. This would be a fun thing to do with a youth group. See what everybody's name means. And you've got to find a reliable source though on that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, you do. It's really powerful. I've done talks at youth groups around the aspect of names. It's really powerful.
Good. Well, speaking of names, we have a familiar name coming on the podcast today. Jason, one of your buddies, Jeremy Affeldt, who actually has 4 World Series rings. And
he has 3. He's been to the World Series 4 times.
Well, wait a minute. Didn't he say he won one with the... Oh, okay, all right.
He won 3 with the Giants, and they lost they got swept by he was with the Rockies, and they got swept by the Red Sox.
Okay, so he has 3. I'm not impressed
3.
now.
But he went to the World Series 4 times.
I thought 4 was impressive. 3's nothing. I mean, anybody can get 3 World Series rings, right?
Except for the Cubs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we're not going to talk about that.
Wow,
but we're going to have Jeremy Affeldt on.
there.
Jeremy is going to talk a little bit with us about baseball. He's going to talk about parents. He's going to talk about sportsmanship. And then he's going to talk about what really is his passion, and that is working with the needy. And talk about some of the work that he's done we're going to ask him to tell us the story of how this all began. But it's great to hear his passion, so it's going to be fun to share that with folks later. But before we get to talking to Jeremy and we talk about some of the things happening in youth culture, we'll go over to the other guys. And as always, what do you got? Question? Kenton's grabbing the mic.
We got a question. And this is, so whenever you meet somebody, whether it's the first time or for the 100th time, handshake, hug, or high five?
They're all H's.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
Wait. So for the first time,
How do we
or
greet
the 100th
people?
time?
That's
For
the
the
question.
first one,
How do we
or
greet
a
people?
well-known person. If you go back and visit a college buddy that you knew really well, how do you greet him versus how do you greet somebody else?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Do you like this question, Jason?
It's interesting.
Yeah, it
do
is
I like
interesting.
It? Sure.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well,
My
here-
opinion
here,
meter's moving
so-
a little bit to the left on this, and I'm not sure I like the question. I should pull a Byron Borger and say, I reject the question. Remember when
You
Byron
really?
on an earlier
I actually
podcast
no. This is
rejected
actually a good
question?
one because I want to find this out. Because, what do you do, Walt? Because I have an idea of about this. but
Handshake,
I'd
hug,
be
or high
really
five?
curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if it's someone for the first time, it's a handshake. And I was taught by my dad to shake hands and to shake hands firmly. He would grab
Yeah.
our hands when we were young, and if we didn't get a good handshake, he would say, "Don't shake hands like a dead fish." And we've all had those handshakes with people where you grab their hand and you're going, "Oh man, your dad should have been my dad and taught you how to shake a hand." But I also
Yes.
note that if in a handshake, I don't get my hand in there far enough in the other person's hand and get a good grip, I'll often say, I would like to shake your hand again because what I just offered you was not a good handshake. So I still have that incentive,
Yeah,
to do what my dad
I think there's
taught
a
me
whole
to do.
science around handshakes.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like that's the way I was taught, firm handshake. But you know what I've learned over the years is my handshake has been so firm that like I don't do it as firm anymore because not as many people have as firm of a handshake. And what I've learned is I would grab people's hands, I'd shake them, and I felt like I was squeezing them to like crumbling, that they were breaking or something. And so as recently I was shaking someone's hand and I didn't go in as quite for the grip that I usually do. And I just remember like, oh man, that was a weak handshake. Let's do that again. Because he had grabbed my hand and gave that really firm handshake, the kind of handshake that we're talking about. And I had to repeat it because I'm so used to not having those firm handshakes anymore, which is interesting.
Huh.
I mean, do you experience that?
Oh yeah. So, but I have friends who I will bypass the handshake now if they're a good friend, and we go right to the hug.
Yeah. Here's the thing. That this is why I went to you first, because I'm similar. If I just have met him, I'll do a handshake. But I also handshake, and a lot of times we'll also grab the arm. I don't know. There's something about bless you, or I don't know.
Like with the
like
other
I don't
hand,
know. There's
with the opposite
Yeah.
hand. Yeah, I gotcha.
yeah. But
As opposed to a
hugs,
handshake
hugs
where
are
you
a big
slide
deal.
up the arm with the hand.
No sliding up the
That
arm.
would just be
But hugs, I agree. If you've known them for a while,
yeah.
bypass the. Now there is the like common man handshake where it's like you grab the arms, not more with a shake but with a grip, and then you come in and the arms kind of sit in the middle as you give a pat hug. But man, I'm all about the full hug where you get in there and you give a really big hug and you're cheek to cheek. And I will tell you this, very few people on the East Coast do this. They think I'm weird. But man, I want to
I
hug.
can't imagine
Like if we're
that.
gonna hug, give a good hug. Because there are times where I've even hugged you, Walt, and sometimes you're like, okay, too much. I want to go in there and I want to get a good hug, cheek to cheek. Come on, brother to brother.
All right. So now I have so much to look forward to.
Group hug
Next
next time we all meet.
Well, I'm going to be on edge now. Am I going to do this right for Jason?
You're
Am I
gonna have performance anxiety.
Oh, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Well, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about youth culture?
We should probably talk about youth culture. That'd be great.
I'm not taking this question.
You're
over
not
to
even
those
comfortable
guys.
with the question. You don't even want to talk about hugging right now. You want to move away
I don't
from
mind
this,
hugging.
which is almost making my point very clear.
I don't mind it.
You're making my point by trying to move on.
Yeah, you're just putting me on the spot because next time I see you, I'm gonna have to think about it. I won't sleep the night before because I'm gonna wonder if is this gonna be okay for Jason? So it's not brought up anymore in any more podcasts. I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I actually like the question.
Yeah. All right. It's a generational thing. That's a Gen X question, right? Yeah. I mean, it just
It might
depends
be.
on the person. So, Yeah.
Yeah,
Again,
it
I don't
does.
mind
I
touch.
mean,
I
and
don't mind hugs. It's not a
depends on
problem.
backgrounds. It depends
Yeah.
on how you feel.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
great. Yeah. So
Well,
we should
let's talk.
some
Let's
about
talk
youth culture.
2-minute drill. Let's talk a little bit about youth culture and keep this moving here.
Yeah,
I know we've got some.
Yeah, let's do. And let's see if we can keep
trends
these in 2
happening.
minutes. I always
All
say
right,
that.
Go for
But,
it.
yeah. All right, here we go. Well, the first trend that I really wanted to look at was what's happening with youth in conversation that's happening in the home and then even outside of the home. There was an experiment right near your front door out in Philly there, Walt, that was just recently done in grocery stores where they wanted a group was trying to start conversations between children, toddlers, and their parents. And so they created environments that really operated much like a classroom. So in the grocery store, they provided questions about, what's near the milk, and would say, where does this milk come from? Or if it's near the vegetables, what is your favorite vegetable? Really trying to get children to engage in conversation, because one of the things that they find is that extra family chatter that happens in low-income neighborhoods actually helps with a word gap that actually occurs in these areas. Ultimately, because of some of the language development that happens for a variety of different reasons. But children only spend about 20% of their time in the classroom, thinking that's where they would learn to grow. So what individuals, educators, and others are trying to do is provide these spaces, both in grocery stores and even outside of it. In the next year or so, they're going to create these environments where they have opportunities to learn near bus stops and really to not only create more chatter, more conversation, but also playing and laughing together as a family, which I think is really, really cool. I think it's going to be a great way to just spark conversation, to enter into and learn how to have conversations as families.
And that's important in a world saturated with social media, because we know that
Yes.
one of the aspects of life that is suffering right now and diminishing is the ability to converse. And so looking people in the eye, talking about things, being comfortable in a conversation with someone who's not your age or older, an adult, let's say, it's becoming more and more difficult. So yeah, any opportunity for a teachable moment and to have conversation is good. All right, so I heard about this thing that's happening, Jason, and I'm not sure what I think about it. Let me tell you about it first. And this comes out of Santa Clara, California. The Santa Clara County, California Office of Education and the National Association for Bilingual Education has now started a campaign. It actually launched about a year ago to have educators in school districts across the country, not just there in Santa Clara, take a pledge to pronounce students' names correctly in order to avoid microaggression, the microaggression of mispronunciation. And I know you've got a last name that's difficult. What's one of the weirdest pronunciations you've ever had of yours?
Oh, the common one was Susanek.
Yeah, Susanek,
That
which
was-
is how I
that was-
mispronounced it. And I guess I was involved in microaggression by just botching your last name. But my last name, too, Mueller, I would get
Yeah.
Muller, Miller, that sort of thing. People would mispronounce it. Lisa's maiden name was Corle, C-O-R-L-E. We just had a conversation with someone yesterday that people would go, Lisa Corley, and, Lisa would raise her hand in school and go, yeah, that's me, whatever.
Yeah.
Pronounce it however you want. But, I mean, the fact that we are now becoming so into micromanaging this that somehow here's a quote from the campaign: mispronouncing a student's name truly negates his or her identity, which in turn can hinder academic progress. Now, look, maybe at times when people deliberately mispronounce a name intentionally to insult somebody, that's an issue. That's not right. But when you just don't know how to pronounce the name, that we go so far as to ostracize people for that. I mean, where is grace? And by the way, if school is truly about educating kids to be lifelong learners, that assumes that there's never a point in your life where you know everything. There's always something else to learn.
That's right.
And shouldn't a teacher be granted that grace as well? That maybe I don't know how to
yeah.
pronounce a student's last name, and we'll learn this together. Yeah.
Well,
so I think
I mean,
it's getting out of hand, but that's
these
my
students
opinion.
or these studies, the individuals that did this should just sit in one of my fantasy leagues for a little bit, because I have done it both here on this podcast and I've also done it in the fantasy leagues that I'm a part of with sports players, which I feel bad about, but there's no sort of aggression attached to it. The next story comes out of Phoenix, my hometown, where I grew up. And one of the things I love is when I see stories of students, teens, that are actually doing things to better their community or help with education. And one of these programs that teens have kind of launched, started, overseen is a thing called Generation Tech. And what they're doing is they're helping older generations understand their smart devices, their phones, their iPads, their tablets, even their computers. And it's provided a space for teens to learn some leadership skills and to learn how to engage in conversation with someone that's older, but also then providing opportunities for those that are older that might not have as much access or feel anxious about using their devices or even getting on things like Facebook or social media. They're providing opportunities to learn. And I just, the thing that stands out to me is I think that there's great opportunities even in church for us to be able to utilize some of the knowledge that our teens have to be able to work hand in hand with the older generation and vice versa. This is just a story that stood out to me, but I just think, gosh, what are ways that we in the church could actually utilize some of the knowledge that our teens have and create these environments where there's learning, but learning that's happening both ways? Because I think that there's gifts and there's knowledge that each possess that actually can be used to glorify God. And what a better way than within a community. And that just sparked out of this one program that was happening in Phoenix. Obviously, they're not a church. This is not necessarily the goal, but it's just something that I thought about as I saw this in the news.
So you've got me thinking now, just so we, as we encourage adults to mentor students, maybe one way for students in our churches to mentor adults would actually be to set up a formal mentoring program where adults bring their devices. Clueless adults, older people, they bring their devices and students walk them through how to use them and operate them. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, Christmas.
I also think, I think it would also, just real quick, give the students even opportunity to take responsibility for how they use their devices. I think
there
a lot
could be
of times
some good
just
talks
simply
about
them
that.
talking about it.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Well, Christmas is coming, and I want to mention this because one of the newest things out there that's the rage, and more kids are asking for this, as are adults, are these virtual reality headsets that you hook your smartphone into or other devices. And I'm sure these virtual reality headsets are just in infancy. They're going to develop very quickly. The technology with these is going to develop over the years. However, this is where I think parents need to show a little bit of restraint. Just because a kid wants it and it's new, do we get this? Because there are concerns, many of them unstated, unknown at this point, some that will arise, health-related or related to the development of the brain, that experts are now warning about. It reminds me of that famous quote from Marshall McLuhan, who said, "First we shape our tools and then our tools shape us." And we typically don't know how our tools shape us until they've misshaped us, and it's usually at that point too late. And so there are, this holiday season, some warnings coming out from folks. The makers of these, for example, HTC said young children shouldn't be allowed to use their headset at all. Google has said that its cardboard headset should be used by kids only under adult supervision. There's really no explanation that's been offered for these recommendations, but health people are saying that the virtual reality as it is right now, we're not sure how it affects people, and because the brain is very plastic in young ages, prolonged exposure with these devices could cause damage. So, and some of the concerns relates to the impact of virtual reality technology can have on kids and their eyes. So, and that's just the start. That's just scratching the surface. So, just to pass on to people that the warning is being issued, don't jump into getting virtual reality headsets for your kids too soon, because the long-term damage could be significant, and the research is being done right now to see actually what that damage might be.
Yeah, that's a really good word, just to be aware of what's out there. I mean, you have a virtual reality headset, right, Walt? No,
I don't.
Obviously,
I don't. I thought about it though. I mean, I'd be kind of neat to see the commercials are kind of cool, in terms of what they see. So I'm curious.
No, great
curious.
word.
Yeah.
Well, one of the last things that I came across just recently was a new thing called Musical.ly. It's a new tool. It's a new app that preteens are using. So our teens and it's a place where their teens and preteens are encouraged to live out their passion and have creative expression through the use of videos attached to music. And this is kind of a new trend. I know that my niece and nephews have utilized this technology, have utilized this tool, and it's just something that I think that we as youth workers and parents should just be aware of. It's something that we're going to have our preteens and teens looking at, maybe participating in. So it's one more place where there's a potential for danger. It's also a great place too for expression of some of the gifts that you have, which is a really great thing to be able to do. Really, the short of it is, it's just a place where you can express yourself and through music, do art, whatever it is. It's recorded like it would be a particular video. Then others have the opportunity to like or follow or comment. The thing that I have liked about this is there are opportunities to report inappropriate content, but they really want to. It seems like the creators of this want to create fun and safe environments. In fact, if you go to the Musical.ly page, there is a place specifically for parents to understand the technology and to lay out some boundaries and some ways in which they need to be aware of how their preteen and teens are using it, which I actually really liked. I don't know if really any other tools like this that have done this for parents. And so I would encourage you to be aware of this, because this might be something that some of the individuals in your lives are engaging, and just to go on real quick and check it out.
Yeah, so it's another platform to be aware of, and it's another opportunity to get to know kids, and another opportunity to exercise your responsibility to monitor kids. And by the way, when I say get to know kids, you get to know a little bit about what's beating through their heart and what's important to them, so you can bring the light of the gospel to bear on that. Speaking of what beats in our heart and what's important to us, I don't know who first said it, but you know, the old cliche that show me your checkbook and I'll show you who or what your idols are, you know, what it is that you worship in life in terms of how you spend your money. There's a lot of research that's been done over the years by marketing firms on where the different generations spend their money. That guides marketing and helps build a loyal customer base as marketers tap into that. I've tracked with that for years. Peter Zallo certainly was one who used to help us with that, Teenage Research Unlimited, but now Business Insider is reporting that they've done some research on non-millennials and millennials and the differences in the way they spend their money. And for those of us who want to reach millennials, I think it's quite telling that millennials are actually spending a lot more than the other generations on what would be classified or called experiences. So this would include things like travel, entertainment, and dining. And in fact, the hard data, the hard research that comes from credit and debit cards, this is the categories of spending distribution by these different generations. Millennials were spending 34% of their money, the money they were spending on experiences like travel, entertainment, and dining, and then non-millennials were spending 28%. So it's significant enough to report on and lower. I just pass this on because kids are experience-driven, and I think we need to keep that in mind, and certainly where we can leverage that to lead them to the truths of Christ through actually experiencing what it means to minister, to actually experience what it means to pray, to actually experience what it means to study the Bible. We need to tap into that. But at the same time, I do think we need to push back on any type of experience-driven concept of God. That at times that can eclipse and cloud and move kids away from understanding, hard truth. And there is hard truth. And I think about that, in our podcast a while ago with Sean McDowell, we talked about that. So we don't want to cave to experience, but we want to understand it, and we want to manage it and balance it in the right way. So, I just thought that was interesting. Where we spend our money, that tells us what's important to us, and experience is on the rise. Well, this is good, and we will continue to keep folks posted on what's happening in youth culture. As always, we remind you, go to cpyu.org. You can sign up for our weekly youth culture e-update, where you'll be able to hear about the latest things that are happening in youth culture. And as always, for this podcast, go to our homepage, cpyu.org, click on the podcast page, and all the stories we just mentioned, they'll be there. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we're going to have a conversation I am really looking forward to We're going to get to talk to Jeremy Affeldt, retired Major League pitcher. Jeremy's a friend of Jason's, a great guy who's doing not only was a great pitcher, but is doing some pretty incredible ministry work, and it'll be fun to hear about that. Talk with him about baseball and ministry when we come back from this break. In an effort to help you help the kids you know and love navigate the difficult landscape of the emerging digital frontier to the glory of God, we've launched a Digital Kids Initiative here at CPYU. Thanks to a generous grant from a company called DAS, you can access our Digital Kids Initiative and a growing number of free resources and downloads by visiting the website at digitalkidsinitiative.com. This is one more way that we're helping you lead your kids to live lives where their faith in God is integrated into the growing amount of time they're spending with social media and technology.
Welcome back to this episode of Youth Culture Matters. We're excited to have as our guest today Jeremy Affeldt. Jeremy Affeldt is a friend of mine. He has played in the major leagues for 14 years, just recently retired, but still does work with San Francisco Giants organization, which we'll probably get to here in a second. But out of that time in the major leagues, he had a heart that just grew for compassion issues. And he wrote a book just recently called To Stir a Movement, and he's been doing that really for many of the years that he was in the major leagues, and continues to do so after his retirement. So I'm excited to have him here as a guest. And Jeremy, I just want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, hey, we're going to just dive right into some conversation. We thought a good place to start would just be to maybe talk briefly about your career in the major leagues, what it's meant to you, and then just some of your passions that have come forward during that time. I also would like to highlight the fact that you have gone to the World Series more, and you've also won more World Series championships than my Cubs have in the last 100 years. So congrats on that.
114, but it's fine. Yeah. So the quick version of my career. I signed out of high school. I went to high school at Northwest Christian in Spokane, Washington, and at 17 years of age, I was drafted by the Kansas City Royals. I turned 18 shortly after that and signed with them and was sent to Fort Myers, Florida. I spent 4.5 years in the minor leagues and was fortunate enough to make the team in 2002 at a spring training. And I never looked back. I spent 14 years in the major leagues. And like you said, and the first 4.5 were pretty rough on me in Kansas City. The first couple years were great because it was a situation where I was in the big leagues at a young age. I was 22 when I got to the big leagues, and it was the greatest thing ever. And after 2 years and losing almost 100 games a year for 4.5 years, except for one of them, after those 2 years of a kind of a honeymoon period with Major League Baseball, I actually hated the game. Because I didn't like losing. I got tired of being hurt. I was hurt a lot and just weird injuries. I have a history of weird injuries over the course of my career, but just started dealing with them.
We won't get into that here.
Yeah. There's some groins and some weird stuff that goes on, in those injuries. But I kind of, for me, I remember I just hated the game after 4.5 years, and I begged God to trade me and move me. And at the All-Star break in 2006, I was traded to Colorado. That made I was pretty excited to be traded until I was halfway to Denver, and I remembered it doesn't have gravity in Colorado. And then I told God maybe I should have been a little more specific in my prayer of where to trade me, not the worst place possible when it comes for a pitcher to pitch in. But I spent 1.5 years there, and you know what, my last year there, I went to my first World Series in 2007. What an awesome experience. I never thought I'd go to a World Series, and then also to have one of my best years actually in baseball. And not only that, but go to the World Series. It was also there where I met a young lady, a homeless girl, that changed my life and kind of got me on this whole deal of To Stir a Movement, the book that I authored, and changed who I was and why I played the game of baseball. So it was a great stop. And I spent 1 year with Cincinnati Reds. Have no idea why I went there, to be honest with you. It was like a 1 year stop. I did learn a sinker which was the pitch I became known for the last 7 years of my career, which is something I needed to learn going into San Francisco, where I signed after that year with Cincinnati, and then ended up being a part of 3 world championships. And what an awesome experience San Francisco was for me, because San Francisco taught me how to understand cultural differences. There's obviously a lot of cultural differences there. There's a lot of political differences. There's a lot of liberal differences there, and just learning how to love people, whether you agree with them or not, was something that I had to learn, and that was the perfect city for me to learn that. And God took me on a really interesting journey on understanding what it truly meant to love your neighbor as yourself, not love your neighbor if only they agree with you type scenario. And so for me, it was awesome, and really enjoyed the whole career. And I just decided last year, at the end of the year, to hang them up. I felt I needed to spend more time with my family. To be honest with you, as a Major League Baseball player, I've been married for 17 years this November, and I've really only known my wife truly for the last 4 years, because I got married at 20, and major leagues can be really glamorous in view, but really tough on marriages and tough on families, and we're gone a lot. And, even though we're home for 4 straight months, you really don't get enough time to get settled before you have to go back again. And so my last 4 years of my marriage has been, probably my most meaningful. And then now I'm transitioning out of baseball, and it's been a really interesting journey this year, just trying to understand what it means to be a husband and a father in a different way. And friction at times, very tough at times, very frustrating at times, but very, very fun too. And I've really enjoyed the transition, and this was a perfect time for me to walk away from the game. I'm 37. I have 3 boys, 9, 6, and 4. And I'm very thankful for the 14 years of my career. It meant a lot. It brought a lot. I learned a lot of life issues. I learned a lot of life scenarios. I learned tons of things that I get to go in and talk to people about whether it be sports or being a man or being an athlete, a Christian athlete in a very secular world. So everything was good for me. It came full circle. I walked away with Kansas City the first time feeling like a loser and feeling like I hated the game of baseball. And pretty much my last year I didn't play there, but the last time I walked off that field in Kansas City, I was a world champion. So it was a full circle of life for me when it came to baseball. And everything God did and orchestrated was pretty impressive, and I'm very thankful for it.
Hey, can I follow up on that, Jason?
Well,
I just want to ask Jeremy, as you tell your story, I'm thinking about kids. I'm thinking about my own childhood. Jason and I have talked about, playing baseball when we were kids and dreams, which you realized, and obviously we didn't, related to professional athletics. But many parents today, you talked about being a parent, being a husband, being a dad, they push kids. They expect kids to rise to the top. We've got kids on travel teams and elite teams that, in our area here, 4 and 5 years old. To parents, what would you say to parents about, the life of that you had in Major League Baseball? Obviously, some trade-offs there from what you said. People don't realize the reality. If you had an audience of parents who have young kids, and those kids are involved in sports and parents are pushing, what would you say to them?
Well, one, I'll never tell a kid not to chase his dreams,
Right.
but I would remind parents that, there's less than a 1% of baseball players from Little League on up that ever make it to the big leagues. It's actually 1% of a 1% or something. So to be honest with you, to see some of these parents and how aggressive they are, how angry they get at some of the games, maybe even like with umpires who have no idea what a strike zone is, to be honest with you. I've seen a couple Little League games here recently, and they have no idea what a strike and a ball is. They're doing their best. They're paid $20 a game or whatever it is. They're not paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to call these pitches. Nor do your kids understand how to hit a fastball yet, so they don't need to be trying to work on all these other pitches to throw. Or you know what? Frankly, they don't even really know if they like the game. They know the parents do. They know the parents are yelling and screaming and pushing them and finding their worth through their children. And I think you put a lot of pressure on kids to find worth based on whether they succeed or fail on a baseball field. To be perfectly honest with you, every parent thinks their kid should be good at something. And the reality is your kids aren't going to be good at everything no matter what you think. And you're getting on coaches for not playing them more, or their kid should be doing this or that, and it's very hard to coach. to be honest with you. So to get on coaches for not doing what you want them to do, he can't please or she can't please everybody. But also the pressure of playing sports. I remember, when I grew up, be frankly honest with you, I didn't go to a baseball camp my entire life. I had raw talent, and I was drafted off raw talent, and I didn't start playing basketball until I was in 6th grade. I didn't even, so there are some areas where you can develop later in life. You don't have to do it nonstop all day, every day, all year long when you're 4 or 5 years old, because you got to remember these kids are trying to be kids, man. They're trying to play. They're trying to, and I know just with my own kids, like they got all kinds of interests. They'll want to play baseball one day and be a doctor the next, and then want to be a basketball player. So to force kids to be one way because you want them to be a certain way and live your life through them, it puts a lot of pressure on these kids. And I can tell you, I played with several major league athletes that literally have the worst relationship with their parents because their dads pushed them so hard that when they got to the major leagues, their dad was more excited than they were. And they honestly didn't even want anything to do with their dad. And they wouldn't have even been a Major League Baseball player if their dad would have pushed them. But he pushed them so hard that any time that they felt like they couldn't do something, they felt they let their dad down or their mom and dad down. And so they kept doing it out of guilt or shame. And then they get to the major leagues and they don't even enjoy it. I've spent tons of time with guys that have great talent, and they would rather do anything but baseball, but they're afraid of how they're going to let their family down because of how they've been raised and some of their family history issues. So, to me, I feel like with kids, man, let them be them. It's hard sometimes, but I think the pressure that you put on a 5 and 6 year old boy to help your identity as a parent, think about the pressure of that.
Yeah.
The way they
that's
would
good.
Mom and dad yell and scream, and at umpires who don't get paid, or if their kid doesn't do well, or if they don't swing right, or if they don't throw the ball right, or if they don't. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to do as parents. Sometimes I can see, like, even sometimes I've even had to kind of be careful of it. But to gain for my kid at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, even 15, 16 years old to be somebody so that my parents can be proud and have an identity issue, it's a lot of pressure to put on a kid.
Yeah. I bet.
Hey, Jeremy,
are your boys just a minute, Jason? Are your boys playing baseball now?
I think you're going where I'm going.
Your boys play?
They're 9, 6, and 4.
Yeah.
My son, my oldest son, my 9-year-old, he remembers the game probably more than my other two do. And I'll ask him if he wants to play baseball, and he's pretty harsh in his no, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. And I think that he wounded him a little bit. It took Daddy away quite a bit. And it's just some kids grab it and be like, hey, this is the greatest thing. Let's I want to be like my dad in this stuff, or I want to play. And for me, I just feel like, there's a situation where, I wanted to be, I see, I read my son like that, and I think, man, like, I can't force you to play something that you absolutely dislike because it took me away. My other two love the game. They play t-ball and they run around and tackle. My oldest is a pretty sensitive kid, and I'm trying to let him just be who he wants to be, because I think he has a worry that he's going to be in my shadow. He doesn't want to. Sometimes I don't even think he wants to play basketball, even though he kind of plays. He's pretty good at it, but I don't think he wants to always play it because Dad played it, and I kind of coach him a little bit. He's afraid he's not going to add up. And I try to walk with him through that. But I'm trying to read my kids differently and not force them to do what they don't want to do. And if they don't want to ever play baseball, that's fine. If they want to, do something that I have no idea how to do, then I'll learn how it's done and try to work with them through it. But the last thing I'm going to do is put pressure on my kids to do or play something that they don't want to do or play.
That's good. Can you see being like an umpire is getting paid $10? You're 17 years old and Jeremy shows up at the game.
Yeah.
Nightmare, man. I'll tell you what, I'd quit right there. No, I know the strike zone.
My kid in t-ball, I was helping my middle one play shortstop, and I was putting him at shortstop, and the coach didn't know who I was, and I was just helping as a dad, and I moved him over, and he said, "Hey, Jeremy, shortstops play a little bit closer to the bag and a little bit back. That's where they play. So why don't you?" I'm like, "Oh, is that where shortstops play?" "Oh man, sorry, I didn't know that. I apologize. And I moved him completely out of position so that the coach could be okay with where he's at. But I had to bite my tongue a few times on some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it is with me and Jason. I bite my tongue a lot. I just let him go.
I bite my tongue with him too.
I know.
I can feel like there's a lot of love in this podcast. That's great. Well, hey, Jeremy, one of the things, because I really appreciate the way that you're talking about your kids, and I know that you and I have talked a little bit about that, and I think there's even something with sports that I've seen that you've modeled as a professional athlete, and I think I saw this most when it was right when it was right after you'd come to the San Francisco Giants, and there was an issue with, I think it was at the Giants stadium, and there was a Dodgers fan that had gotten hurt, or was it vice versa? Was it the other way around?
No, it was a Giants fan that got hurt at a Dodgers game in LA after opening day.
I remember I was in LA I was there to speak that weekend and watched that whole thing.
Oh.
Yeah. And I remember you were delegated as the individual from the San Francisco Giants to go, and not just delegated, you wanted to be able to participate in that. And so I would love to, because we're talking about sportsmanship, and I remember you had an opportunity to share before a game, and you just had some words around the game, and even outside of that, I remember having conversations around faith and God and who God wants to win. Would you just share for those of those listeners that are maybe for the first time hearing this, maybe kind of real quickly describe the situation and then share some of the stuff that you had shared both at the game and then with the media?
Yeah, Brian Stowe was the fan that was hurt, and he was just coming after a Dodgers game, and he was walking out to the parking lot and wearing a Giants jersey, and he got attacked. I think they feel like it was a gang thing, and he got attacked and knocked down, and in 45 seconds he got his head beat in so bad they had to take apart his skull. He went into he was pretty much, in a coma for a long time. I visited him when he actually had half a skull, and it was a very scary thing to see. He got, brought all the way back down to baby infant status when he came out of it. He had to learn how to crawl, walk, talk. His humor even was lowered down so far down to almost like he would laugh at 6 and 7-year-old jokes. Very, very tough thing for me to watch. He had 2 kids. He's 40 years old. He's still trying to learn how to walk, appropriately and get through some stuff. And it's going to be a tough life for him. But it happened in 45 seconds, and it was all because he was wearing a Giants jersey in a Dodger stadium, and they didn't like it, and they attacked him over it. The Dodgers and the Giants came together on the next homestand at our place, and both teams walked on the field, and we talked about what it meant to be a true rival. And so we got to be honest, and a lot of players don't get to do that. So I just stood in front of the microphone. It was actually a little bit of I don't get intimidated by a whole lot of things, to be honest with you, but I think on this subject alone, it was pretty tough. And you had actually media from almost every outlet in the world were filming it. I could not believe the amount of. It was almost like at a World Series game, the amount of cameras that were there to film the speeches from the Dodger, Jamie Carroll, who's a friend of mine on the Dodgers, and then myself talking. And I just basically addressed the crowd on the whole issue of what it really meant to be a fan, and to understand that players, even players themselves in rivalries, we get into it, we fight, we argue, we hit each other with baseballs and charge the mound, and we get into these things, right? There's a lot of testosterone on that field, and it's not nice testosterone. This isn't like friendly competition. This is, look, man, this is what I do for a living. It's no longer Little League, and it's not just having fun. It can be a little different, but the reality of it is at the end of the game's over. Whether you win or lose, it's over, and you leave it on the field. And the fans need to understand that the people that get the most out of this, the fans seem to get more angry than the players, and the players aren't even that upset about losing the game. We like rivalries. They're good. Cheering, booing is a part of the game. Cheer, boo, do whatever you want to do, but when you take a physical assault to somebody based on the fact that the jersey they're wearing doesn't replicate yours, and you just want to be mad about it because maybe your team won and lost, the bragging rights is whether your team won and lost. The bragging rights isn't the fact that they're wearing a jersey of the team that lost and you should beat them up. because you beat up another fan from another team, and everybody has a right to be a fan and cheer for who they want to cheer for. And if they lose, you can tell them they lost. You can do whatever you want. There's fun fan conversations and little banter here and there. But the reality of it is, when you take physical harm to a person and change their life based on the fact that a team won and lost a game, is unacceptable to me. And the fans, we take off our uniform and we put on our regular street clothes. We get in our cars and we go home. And we get up the next day and we try to win again. Maybe we're upset for a little bit, but we get over it. And we don't. There is nothing that a fan can justify when doing those kind of harmful acts to a human being, because of the fact that they don't wear the same jersey that you wear, root for the same team you root for. We don't even get that angry. And so that needs to stay on the field. And you need to cheer. And when you leave the stadium, let it go. It's all right. Be excited for your team. But to create violence, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that people get so angry when their team loses, because, again, they're gaining their identity through a team that of a bunch of guys that have literally no idea who you are. We know you cheer for us, or you don't like us because you boo us. I don't know you personally. Frankly, I don't know what makes you sleep at night. But the reality of it is you guys should not lose sleep over whether you win or lose, or whether that we lose sleep over that. But we don't take physical harm to anybody on the streets because of it. And for me, this identity thing is a really big deal. This really idea of a fan is a really big deal. Be a fan. You can be upset when your team loses because you're rooting for them and you let down. But when you get rage, anger, like, you are way too caught up in the situation. And you're seeing that. You're seeing states, cities get so have an identity crisis over an 18, 20, 25-year-old woman or man, whether they can catch a football or baseball or softball or make a basket. And literally their world comes to an end if they don't come through. And to me, that's an issue. And that's an issue that's being now put on these young kids of identity and who they are. And so for me, you know what? I don't agree with fan violence at all. And it needs to stop, and it needs to go away. And if you're that angry, or if you're that happy based on a win and a loss, I think there's other people out there that get paid a lot of money that can probably help you, and they're called counselors, and you probably need it.
Really? Yeah.
Wow.
Boy, this is really good, because the more empty we are, and the less we find our identity where we should, this is where we go with this stuff.
That's right.
And I just, this is what we talk about, Jason, all the time. People are finding their identity, looking for a redeemer in all the wrong things. And sports is one of those places we go, living vicariously through our kids. This is good. This is good. It's really making me think about my love for the Philly teams right now. You're challenging me, Jeremy. That's good. Don't say it. Yeah.
I hope there's a lot of Philly fans out there. They all need to be challenged. They are angry individuals at those games, boy. Man.
I get that. I've been there. There all those years ago into those games. Good. Hey, we should take a break here. And when we come back, we'll pick up the conversation again. We're talking to Jeremy Affeldt. We're talking about his career in Major League Baseball and what he's doing now with nonprofits and ministry and working with kids. So stick with us. We'll be right back. Here at CPYU, we're taking steps to help parents, youth workers, educators, and anyone else who cares about kids help the kids they know and love navigate the difficult issues of life. We've put together a one-day training seminar called Tackling the Tough Stuff that we can bring to your community. Over the course of the day, Mark Penner and I will provide information and practical steps you can take to address narcissism, pornography, self-injury, depression, suicide, and a variety of other tough issues kids face in today's world. To learn more about bringing Tackling the Tough Stuff to your church or community, go to cpyu.org/tough stuff or call us at 1-800-807-CPYU.
Welcome back to Youth Culture Matters. Again, our guest is Jeremy Affeldt. And Jeremy, we love to do something here on this podcast with our guests. This allows our listeners to learn a little bit more about you. It's called Take 5. And for this episode, we have Walt asking the question. So I apologize in advance for any that you might be asked. So Walt, take it away. What are your 5 questions for
Okay,
Jeremy.
I've got one serious question, and then I'm going to ask you some baseball questions because I love baseball. I'm curious about this, but let me give you the serious one outside of the Bible, because I know whenever, whenever you ask this question about books, people always feel like, well, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus, I better say the Bible. But outside of the Bible, what book has influenced you the most? And I'm guessing you read. You've written books, so
Yeah.
what book? Yeah, recommend it because we love telling people what to read.
Yeah, there's a book that impacted, but it's not for everybody. I'll give you a couple that I really enjoy because I think that it depends on where you're at. There's a book I work with an organization called True Face. They saved my marriage a few years ago, but they wrote several books. But Bo's Cafe is a book that I have read. It's a phenomenal book on a control. And most of us are control freaks in nature. If you're successful, you're definitely a control freak. One point or another, you want things to go a certain way. But Bo's Cafe just it's a story about a man that gets kicked out of his home for verbally abusing his family and using anger and control and manipulation to get his way. And he got kicked out by his wife, and he met a guy in a bar, and he went on a journey with this guy in Bo's Cafe, and it's just an interesting journey on understanding relationships and people and how not to try to control people. When we try to do it, a lot of things go away, and a lot of good things go away. And for me, that was a book that highly impacted my life, still does. I listen to it probably every couple months on audiobook. It's a really good audiobook, actually. Then there's, another one that really changed my life was called The Shack. It's a very controversial book, but it was a good book. I really enjoyed what it had to say. And I know the author personally, and I know the story behind the writing of it, which actually makes it a lot more understandable when it comes to life and dealing with life issues. And then The Hole in the Gospel by Stearns over there.
That's good.
Was a huge book for me on understanding our world and the culture on which the church. You think you focus, like you said, on I got to say the Bible and I got to say these right things and I got to do this, but then we actually miss a lot of the point of why Jesus even came. And it wasn't just for fire insurance. There was a big part, it comes to salvation and it comes for who we are in Christ, but what it means to be in Christ and what it means to be followers of Christ and how we can really help change our country, our cities, our world based on, two simple things of love your God and love others. And you think it's a simple statement, but it's actually, obviously people know this, but it's way harder said than done. Yeah. And so those 3 books have been pretty impactful for me.
That's good. We'll include links to all those too, so that's good. All right, second question. What major league city, other than San Francisco, would you say has the most baseball-savvy fans, people who know the game the best?
Yeah, Boston probably is probably one of the most baseball-savvy cities anywhere. I had friends that played for them, and within 1 week of playing for them, he couldn't even walk around town. Everybody know who he was. They knew his stats. They know what he did. Very, very baseball savvy, in my opinion. It's one of the most historical teams, but the fans there are not just they're not like social fans. Those fans have passed.
And knowledgeable.
Yeah. Man, and they're season ticket holders, almost all of them. There's rarely anybody that can get very few tickets can you get now that are just you can buy at the walk up, right? So those people have passed their season tickets down for 10s and 15 years. It's been a pretty sometimes 30, 40, 50 years of passed down tickets. So it's a great city.
Chris, you all right over there?
I'm not going to disagree.
Yeah. Chris is a Yankees fan. Let's move on.
No.
Number. I love your answer. I was hoping you'd say Philadelphia. I'm not going to even ask you where those fans rank, but
yeah.
All right, just enough. Quiet. All right, so number 3. I love this question. I really want to ask you this. The batter you feared the most. When this guy would come to the plate against you, you really had to crank it up.
Man, I don't know if I had a fear of very many. I don't think I had a fear of any hitters, but I had issues with some. And you know what? I had an issue with a guy, and then statistically, someone showed me the stats, and I had better stats against than I thought, But I think it's just because he hit the ball hardest when he did hit it off me. But I gotta think Garrett Anderson was a guy that lefty on lefty. I should have owned him. and I actually had an okay, I guess. But I think it's every time he hit the ball, it was a rocket either at somebody, so I thought it was a hit, or it was a rocket for a hit. And because I thought he was 12 for 10 off me.
Yeah.
Like I thought he hit balls so hard they gave him 2 hits on one of them. Like I thought I never got him out, but
Yeah.
he was a guy I could not stand. If there was I started walking him. I just would throw balls not even close, and he would look at me, and I said, "Look, it's better than a double, man. So go to first. I'm not going to sit there and give up 2 runs here." So, but he was a guy that I really had problems with. I felt like, late in the games, especially, he was a guy I just didn't, for whatever reason, I kind of had a mental block against.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good because I know you know something about hitting because you had a season where you hit 500, right, as a pitcher?
Yeah. I was
That's
a Hall of Fame
impressive.
hitter for a year.
That is amazing.
The year I was a Hall of Fame hitter. It was great.
Yeah. 1 for 2.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell
That's
us
right.
about that hit. You probably remember that, like.
Yeah, game-winning RBI. It was awesome. Tony La Russa tried to pitch against me. Well, there was, I guess, the Dodgers was the 1 for 2 year. I had another year where I was 2 for 3.
Oh, man.
I think, or 2 for 4. Maybe that's a 500 year too.
Yeah.
There was something like that. The Dodger one was a full-on hack. Like literally, guy was throwing 96 with sink. Took a full swing. The ball went off the end of my bat with such great cue speed. Like it literally zipped on the ground up the third base line, and I beat it out to first base. And I remember Orlando Hudson was the second baseman for the Dodgers, and he comes running over to second, or coming over to first, just in case he had to back up a throw if they tried to make a throw to first and the second baseman was covering line. And he was over there, and he looked at me, and he goes, "I just want to let you know a grown man hit that ball." And I'm like, yeah, you're right. A grown man hit a ball 30 feet, full swing.
Yeah.
Full swing, and it went 30 feet. It was pretty impressive.
That's
That was my
awesome.
most impressive, I think, trick hit. I actually ran the hitting meeting after that because our guys were struggling with hitting. So I went in and told them how to squash the bug and throw the hands, and learn how to like hit the ball, like look like you're going to hit the ball one way, and then throw the ball and then hit the ball the other. I mean, they actually kicked me out of the hitters meeting, but I did get some great video footage of that. It was pretty awesome.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I was doing my homework. I did watch a few YouTube videos of you.
Yeah.
And there was one game against the Braves. Well, I won't say anything about that. People can look at that's
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Stay hanging.
One of
in
the
there for-
greatest swings in sports history.
Yeah, that was awesome. Hey, all right. So it's another baseball question. Most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you in a major league game?
Man,
Was
most
there anything-
embarrassing
Yeah.
happened to me in a major league game.
Or in a minor
Man.
league game, if the thing that pops into your head is, your professional career.
Yeah, in a major league game, I don't know much of it. You know what? Can I do it in a spring training game?
Yeah,
Because
that's fine.
still talk about it, man. I was playing the Reds. I was with the Giants, and we went to Cincinnati over there. Well, where they played in their spring training, and the guy bunted a ball up a line. Third baseline is running on second, and I picked up the ball to throw to third to throw him out, and it was a young kid that they brought up from the minor leagues, and I picked up the ball and I fired it so fast at him, and I tried to hurry up that the ball went by him before he even knew I threw it to him. So he was like looking for the ball, and I said, "I already threw it." And he looked at me. He's like, "What?" Yeah, and the ball literally went by him into the stands and hit like a 70-year-old woman right in the chest, like squared her up. Like it was so bad that I sat there and felt. I literally, I thought that I would be the first pitcher to actually kill somebody, like literally kill a fan throwing a ball, because I threw it so hard and she was not ready, and it went so far up the third base line. This lady is in like straight no chance you're getting with a hit with a ballville, right? Like she's so far out there, and she got squared up, and the whole crowd was like, "Oh!" And I looked in the dugout, and Bochy's just shaking his head at me, and they brought me out the next morning. I got 9 years in the big leagues, man. And they brought me out at like 7 a.m, and I had to do like what they call PFPs. I'd do bunt drills and learn how to throw the ball to third. And now when I go back there, they actually tell me they're going to raise the net. Like they're going to raise one of those little foul ball nets when I come in to pitch. I mean, they actually request it. It might like, man, Bochy will be like, "Oh, I'm bringing in Affeldt, so you might want to lift the net up." Like he'll literally say that to him. And it was so embarrassing for me because you're a Major League Baseball player, and I mean, it was a bad throw too. I mean, the whole thing was just straight not good. I mean, the throw was bad, the play was bad. It was literally, I'd walk off the field thinking I need to stop playing now, because if you're that unathletic in the play that you make, you don't deserve to be on a field. I mean, it was so bad.
Yeah.
Man, it was so bad.
Well, speaking of
but
athletic or
embarrassing-
non-athletic, yeah, go
What's
ahead.
that?
Go. I got my next question.
Oh yeah,
Speaking-
yeah. Well, honestly, the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me though was I was a rookie in Seattle, and they thought it'd be funny to unscrew the baby powder family pack cap. So it's like a really big bottle of baby powder, really big. I mean, like Costco version.
Yep.
And I don't know how they knew I was gonna walk in there, but I did, and I went to do baby powder stuff because that's what ball players do. So I put it down my pants for obvious reasons. Well, the cap fell off, and the whole entire thing went into my pants. But I didn't have time to change, so I had to run out there for the game because I couldn't be late. So I had to pull my pants, and I'm running out to the field, and I'm sprinting across the field, and I got two teammates looking at me, stretching and laughing. I go, "What?" And I look behind me, and there's literally a thing of smoke coming out my rear end. It's like billowing out. I don't know what to do, and I go to sit down, and I sit down on the bullpen, and it's just a puff of smoke. And then I look down, and it's pouring out of my pants, like, because I literally have like it's a amazing amount, and everybody's laughing. Problem is I got put into pitch that game, and I'm literally running in, and I look down, and I'm coming set, and my black cleats are like baby powder white, like it's pouring out while I'm pitching. It's the most uncomfortable feeling, and I'm thinking, man, I really hope this isn't seeable. I mean, this is really bad, and guys were just. I mean, it was a really embarrassing moment for me because it was literally coming out. Fans were laughing as I was running out. They called me smoke screen as I was running. It was actually pretty impressive.
That's what we call Kenton here. Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you a fifth question here. And speaking of athletic or non-athletic, I don't know if Jason's told you, but he's quite a hitter. Did he ever tell you that? I mean, he can. He said he could. We've had discussions about this on the podcast. I mean, he really went off on this. So here, I want you to imagine this. You're facing Jason Sochanek. He's at the plate. Your first pitch, you're going to throw it low and away, right down the middle, or high and tight. What do you think?
You know what? There's a good chance I'm probably going to buzz him a little bit.
There you
so
go.
I'll probably throw it up and in.
Yeah.
Just to see what he could do. I just want to see his reaction.
That was my answer, too. That's how I would answer. That's good, yeah. Good.
There,
Jason.
Yeah, there might be some cursing in that. I don't know. we'll see. I might see my life flash before my eyes.
Yeah,
We'll see about that. I have never tried to take that offer from Jeremy. Although when you would do a training, I would say, hey, I should come out and just sit in front of the batter's box and see what it's like. And then I took a second thought as soon as I said that and said, no, I don't think I need to do that.
You know what, Jason? Here's what we should do. Next time I come out there, let's go to a ballpark. We'll get him there, get somebody to catch, and just each of us one time stand in a batter's box with a bat and see if we can stay in there.
Yeah. It would be really cool to hit
would-
you, though, and see what you guys think it would feel like to be hit. Like right
Oh
there.
yeah, that would be really cool. I'd
Jason would
actually
scream
love
like-
that.
Yeah. Jason would be screaming like
I
a
would
baby.
scream?
Yeah.
You would scream. Oh man, that just doesn't sound fun. But I don't know. Maybe it would be fun.
There's a first
Who
time for
knows?
everything. It's
Yeah.
like a thrill ride. We could actually probably sell tickets. What it's like to be hit with a major league fastball. That's actually not a bad deal.
By a major league ball player. That's actually a great fundraiser.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
You
Let's
should do it for
yeah.
your nonprofit.
Yeah.
That would-
Who can take the most? Who can take the most? You just keep throwing at us. We'll take
Yeah.
turns.
You
Be
should
like
do
home run
that.
derby.
You should
Yeah.
do that at your upcoming banquet
$100
and
yeah.
do yes.
$100
Yeah, we
a
should
hit.
auction that off.
Yeah.
I might try it. I might
Yeah.
try
That'd be
it.
awesome.
I'm sensing a CPYU Project 619
There
home
you
run
go.
derby.
That's it. Well, no.
with Jeremy as the
It
pitcher.
wouldn't be a
I
home
like
run
No,
derby.
there's no
Let's
home
set up a
run in
short
this.
fence.
Hang
There's
in
no
there,
home
derby.
run.
Stay
It's
in the
just getting
batter's
buzzed
box,
by
derby.
Jeremy.
That'd be it. Yeah, that'd be awesome. How fast did you
All right.
throw, by the way, real quick? What was your fastest velocity when you throw, fastball?
You know what? I think there was a juice gun that told me I was throwing 100 one day in St. Louis. But I kind of feel like that's a little bit high. But I'd hit 99, 98 a little bit when I was way younger. And I threw a lot of four seams, and then I found out the harder you throw it, the further it gets hit. Most of the time. So it's when I started taking a little off and putting movement on it, and found out that I got way weaker contact and ground balls right to a second baseman rather than fly balls to the fan in left center. There's a lot more, there's a lot more success in the ground balls a second.
See, if you threw like that in that contest with Jason and I just concede Jason would win because he'd never see it. He'd just be standing in there going, well, go ahead,
you have to
throw it.
Yeah, no.
I did.
I was a good hitter, and let's clarify this. I was a great hitter in high school. I was not anywhere close to ever even getting to another level. So, that this argument stops right there. Oh man.
All right, go ahead, Jason.
Anyways, yeah.
Thanks for answering those questions.
I can explain later, Jeremy. But let's pick up the conversation. At the very beginning, we talked about you wrote a book called "To Stir a Movement," and I want to steer our conversation into how that book even came about, how this movement that you are now a part of came about, and maybe what we should do is start with the story that you began to tell about the girl that you met in Denver, and maybe then share what has come of that.
Yeah, when I got traded to Denver, I hated the game of baseball, and I hated actually just a lot of things about life because I didn't really understand purpose. It was Groundhog's Day for me. You go to the field, you get cheered, you get booed, you go home. But I didn't, I'm kind of built a little differently. Some guys are built like they can be okay with that, but I'm built on the idea of you got to have impact in what you do. And I didn't really understand what baseball was doing. I understood what it could be doing for superstars, but I didn't understand what it did for the average player or just someone that's maybe not at a superstar status, which I was not. So I just kind of questioned, why I was playing the game and why I was here. And I remember walking to Starbucks after I got traded in downtown Denver. I was living at the hotel at the time, and I was walking to Starbucks, and there was a little, probably a 16-year-old girl. There's a lot of street kids in Denver. They congregate there for whatever reason. There's just a lot of them, and there was a homeless teenage girl there, about, like I said, about 16, and black guy, split lip, torn clothes, probably not the best night the night before, and scared to death. She was actually outside of a Rite Aid, eating a dry cup of noodles, and she was shaking a little bit. And I reached down to touch her shoulder, and she kind of shied away from me. And I said, I don't want anything from you. I just want to know if you want something to eat. And she said, that'd be great. So I went into Starbucks, and I got her one of those naked sludgy drinks that, the green one that looks terrible but tastes good type thing, and has a lot of nutrients. And I got her something with the most sugar she could possibly have. I think she needed some sugar, and I got her a blueberry muffin or whatever it was. And I walked out and grabbed it to her, or handed it to her, and she grabbed it from me, and she ripped it from me, and just was so thankful. But she was so hungry, and she looked up at me and said, thank you. And it was an interesting scenario for me because in my world as a baseball player, I felt really lonely. I didn't know who I could talk to about my situation. I felt like who's gonna want to listen to a guy say he hates playing Major League Baseball, every kid's dream when they grew up, and not enjoying it. And so I didn't know who to talk to. I was kind of lost in who I was. I didn't know why I was where I was and what I was doing, and who, my identity was lost. But you know what? There's an interesting scenario when she said thank you, because our eyes met for quite a bit. I don't know how long, I can't say, but it felt like a long time. We just stared at each other, and our realities met because she was lost. She didn't know who she was. She was scared. And we had literally the same reality in life. My clothes looked better. My place of work looked a lot better. There's a lot more. I had a house to live in. I had a lot more safety than she had, but our realities and our minds were somewhat the same. And when she said thank you, it wasn't just a thank you for the food. It was basically saying thank you for letting me know I exist. Because a lot of people, when you see a homeless person, you walk on the other side of the street, they ask you for money, and you kind of look up or look at your phone or act like you didn't hear them. We've all done it. We still do it. It's an awkward scenario. So for me, when she said thank you, it was that. It was thank you for letting me know I exist, because I don't know if people do, and I'm lost, and I wanted people to know that my reality existed, and I didn't know who to talk to about it or who would relate with me to it. So it was a really tough thing for me to deal with what I was dealing with. But when I handed that girl that food and she said thank you, I remember walking to the field that day feeling very, very joyful in who I was as a human being. And my biggest regret that day was not getting to know her story, asking her what got her where she was at. But to be honest with you, I went to the field that day. I sat in the bullpen out in the outfield like I did almost every game, just to kind of gather my thoughts before a game and sit by myself. And sometimes I pray, sometimes I listen to music, sometimes I read. It just depends on the situation. And I just felt thankful. And for the first time in my career, I understood what I wanted, why I was a baseball player. And so from that time on, you know, I had a focus. I had a focus on starting an organization that basically would love other people and would try to get other people to understand who they are and lead. And so I didn't know how to do that. I started Generation Alive, and initially I started it as a kind of a leadership thing, but to go into schools and talk about surrounding yourself with people that believe in you, have a vision for your life, dream big. And those are all good things. But I kind of changed it up after a little bit. Once I kind of, you know, I had an opportunity to win a World Series in Colorado. And we did these assemblies, and it was really good, but I just, something wasn't sticking. But because I remember that girl, and I wanted to know, why did I have so much joy with that? And maybe those were good thoughts for that girl, but I still didn't have really a lot in me that said it was the right route. And I remember getting done with an assembly at a school, and a girl came up to me, and she's like, you know, that was a good speech. And I kind of laughed at her, and I said, thanks. And she says, but I got one question. I said, okay. I said, you talk about friends and surrounding yourself with people who believe in you, and gathering people around you as a support group and making good decisions. But what if we're in an area where the only decision we have is to steal for to eat, or to sell drugs so we have money to be able to provide for us because our families can't, our moms and dads can't. So we have to figure out a way to live. And so there's no other choice for us. And we have to commit crimes and do different things just because we're trying to survive. And our only friends that we can surround ourselves with that actually will protect us are the local gang members, because they're the only ones that we can believe that would actually protect us. What if we're in that situation? Because your speech doesn't make sense to us in those situations. And, you know, it really got to me. And I read the Hole in the Gospel about the same time, and everything was getting to me that way. And I was like, man, we got to change this up, because I remember helping that girl out and feeling so good. And I didn't have to tell her to surround herself with friends that believed in her. I didn't have to tell her to make good decisions. I simply needed to let her know that she existed and I care about her. And so that's when I kind of got on this to stir a movement idea of doing these a lot of different things in the community, and understanding, you know, we do a hunger initiative because I think hunger is a big part of a community issue, right? 1 in 6 in the country have food insecurities. But, you know, and human trafficking we do at Generation Alive, because I believe human trafficking is one of the, you know, when we let people know what human trafficking does to a community and how devastating it can be to the human life, because it's one of the biggest injustices known to man. From a spiritual version, honestly, from a Christianity perspective, you know, the greatest injustice I think to mankind is not knowing who Jesus is. I think the second greatest injustice is human trafficking, because you take life and you use them as a product, and they're a reusable product. And the third, I think, is hunger and lack of water. But to be honest with you, we do different things because I wanted to figure out a way to talk to kids, even at a young age, about what poverty looks like in a community and what pains come from that. And can we alleviate those pains? Yes, but how? And we can't just have sympathy where we're like, oh, I feel bad for that person. We need to have compassion where we act on our sympathy. And we don't say, oh, too bad for them, or, oh, man, it stinks. That stinks, and now what do we do about it? And I think when communities have people like that involved in what's going on, that's when cities change, countries change, nations change. And it simply comes from the fact that the reason that I gave that girl that food is because I was on my way, because I was hungry. And the simple love your neighbor as yourself. You know, I have a forearm tattoo that says no man shall live for himself. I like that. For me, that just resonates with me a little bit more, but it's still the same thing. And I don't live for myself, and I don't want to live for myself. And if I'm hungry, I want something to eat. And no one's going to tell me what I'm going to do for a living. I have a choice in that matter. And frankly, no one's going to tell me who to have sex with. I have the choice. I have the choice to have sex with whoever I want to have sex with. You know, and so for me, to be forced into those scenarios in a way where I have no choice is an injustice. To not have food, to simply focus and live and be, is an injustice. And we are here as human beings, and we are here on this earth, whether you're a Christian or not, but especially if you're a Christian, to reflect Jesus. And he said, I am here, man, to set the captives free, man. I'm here to do different. I'm here. When people were hungry, he fed them. And when they were thirsty, he gave them something to drink. And Matthew 25 is the premise on which I do what I do. And when Jesus said, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. And that's a big deal for me. And so we started Generation Alive, and I changed up the whole do the assemblies to talk on that, to become an organization that understands what poverty is in an organization, or even pains of poverty, even impacts of poverty, not just poverty, but what are the needs in a community, and how can we help with those needs and alleviate pains if they don't have those needs, and how can we train leaders to be servant leaders and to serve their community, not think that it doesn't exist, and only serve people in areas that we're comfortable with when it comes to our status of living. And I can tell you, it's been a great journey, man. It has been an interesting one, but the organization is doing so well. We have a CEO, we have a staff. I'm on the board. I do some fundraising stuff. I don't necessarily deal with the everyday details, because I think I'd burn out with all the other stuff I got going on. But I have hired a staff that has done an amazing job. And the city's changing. I mean, I walk all over this city, and people are like, "Hey, man, Generation Life was at my school. We did a hunger thing." Parents have come up to me randomly on the street, and they don't even know who I am. They just see the hat. They're like, "Hey, is that a Generation Live hat?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Wow, that organization's amazing." I'm like, "Yeah, it is a good one." And I just talked to them about it. I mean, the impact that it has on a community is great. And I knew that my life changed, and and from that, you can flip over my baseball card. And from that year on, 2006 was a really rough year, but it was one of my last rough years. From 2007 on was some of the best years of my career, and it was because I think I had a different focus. I not only lived for my wife and my kids. I played the game, for them, but I also played for other people. I played to have a platform to be able to speak into these things. I played because I knew that people looked up to athletes as role models, and I said, well, then I'm going to be an active role model, and I'm going to bring awareness to certain things. And I am now, because of my World Series status and because of my successful status as a baseball player, I'm actually having doors open to me that a lot of people wouldn't, and that's okay. I don't get mad about it. I don't roll my eyes and say, well, the only reason I'm here is because of this. I embrace it. And I say the reason I'm here is because God gave me the ability to do a really, really wonderful thing called baseball. And these doors are open to me, whether to be big churches or big organizations or small churches or small organizations. The doors are open to me to be able to come in and to speak and to use my gifting as a speaker because of what I did on the baseball field. And you know what? That's called platform, and I'm completely okay with it. And I enjoy using it, and I enjoy what we're doing in these communities, and I enjoy being a part of it. And To Stir a Movement was a book I wrote because it talks about my journey. It's not a biography. I don't think I'm old enough to be able to write a biography, but I think I'm more the reason I got to being and thinking the way I do was an interesting one, and I wanted people to know it. So it went back way into my childhood. How I was slowly molded into being this person, and now, even now, I make so many mistakes, and whether it be in my marriage or my family or in friendships or even decisions I make with people in the community. I know I'm not perfect, but I'm willing to put myself out there, and I'm willing to say I'm not perfect, but I still love Jesus, and I still love my neighbor, and I don't act like it all the time because I have flesh on my bones, and so I'm going to live out of my flesh, but I have a heart. And I have a heart that beats for the kingdom of heaven, and I have a heart that beats for what Jesus has asked us to have a heartbeat for, and I strive for that. And so in my writings, you'll see it, in my blogs, you'll see it. I just want to relate to everybody in a way that they can see Jesus appropriately. And soapbox Christianity is not it for me. I don't believe in hellfire and brimstone. I believe in loving my neighbor as myself, and I believe in loving God and asking him to help me understand my neighbor and understand that my neighbor doesn't always think like me or look like me or live like me, but they're still human beings, and they're still loved by and created by Jesus. And I'm very, very thankful for the opportunities I've been given to be able to speak on those platforms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so many of our listeners are youth workers and parents, and I'm curious what you would say to those that can't have, because not every city can have Generation Alive. I know that maybe long term that's a vision that you and your team have talked a lot about, but I know you're doing work in San Francisco and Spokane. So we have individuals that are listening to this all around the country, and so what I'm curious is what you would say to that youth worker, youth pastor, or parent who really love what you've been able to do, where you're taking youth in the schools, getting them plugged into hunger initiatives, to human trafficking issues, educating them and empowering them to then speak to others. What would you say to those individuals that can't necessarily have a GA come in and assist, or a Jeremy Affeldt that comes in and speaks? What would you do to empower those individuals that might be listening?
Yeah, I think that we're not doing anything that the church hasn't been called to do. So, for me, Matthew 25 is a verse that I think that youth workers really need to key in on, because it isn't about looking a certain way. It isn't about, people seeing you a certain way necessarily. It isn't about having certain things. If you look at Matthew 25, Jesus talks about someone that's hungry, someone that's in prison, someone that's naked. So there's so many different things that he talks about, and it doesn't look like someone that's living the great life, and trying to look a certain way. And I think a lot of these churches, man, we're trying to look blessed. We're trying to look holy. We're trying to react like we're holy. And the fact of the matter is, like, every day we go into church, I see these people, and you go up to them and they say, hi, hi, and you ask how they're doing, and almost everybody says blessed. And I know that's a fun answer, but there's no way everybody feels that way. I know it's the answer maybe you want people to think you are, but man, this is the same guy that flipped people off on the way to church and cussed at their wife all the way down the hill, right? So, like, I've done it. I've been in those situations where I've been cussing at my wife or yelling at my kids, or mad at somebody, and then I get to church and they, how you doing? Oh, I'm great, and my wife's looking at me like, what? You were miserable to be around. And so they're not, everybody is always doing great. And with these youth workers, man, these kids need to know that life is real and raw, and we're gonna, and communities don't always thrive, and we can't sit there and ignore it. We can't sit there and say, well, we're only gonna hang out in our little area over here because we don't want to actually be a part of that over there, because God forbid we hang out with sinners and we become like them. Because that's what the Bible says, because we take it completely out of context and we just say, well, don't hang out with them unless you're going to become like them. And I think we get into that fact of like, well, I don't really know how we're going to share the love of Jesus if we can never go out and actually share it. Because right now, I feel a lot of times we're sharing the love with Jesus with people that already have the love of Jesus. And we stay in our churches and we hang out there and we talk about God because it's the cool thing to do and it's the right thing to do. But go out there, no, don't hang with them. Don't go around them. They're gross. They're dirty. They don't think like us. They're immoral. They God forbid they're even here. Like they're gonna go to hell if they keep living their life the way they live it. And then no one connects with them. I want youth workers to take their kids into some areas and say, look, this is what reality is for a lot of people. The 10% or the 1% are exactly that. They're the 10 and the 1%. So you have to go to the rest of the 80 or 90 or 99% and say, this is the way life is. And as the church, we're here to let people come in and to be loved, not judged. We're here to help where there's a need, not act like there is no need because we don't want to deal with the dirty sinner. We need to go out in the community. We need to be part of it. So whether GA's there or not, you still go out and say, man, what can we do? What can we do to love our neighbor as ourselves? Our neighbors are dealing with this right now. If I was that person, what would I need? Could I help it? Could my kids help do that? I don't care if it's cleaning up houses, repainting homes, making sure someone's car is fixed, raising money to help with whatever cause you want to help within your community. But you need to be advancing that way because we have to teach our leaders to be servant leaders. Because if we don't, we all know politically we're not going to agree with stuff, but we got an issue in this country with leadership. And it's because it's a selfish leadership. It's not a servant leadership. And the only way to change that is to start raising a bunch of new generation leaders as servants and understanding that there are pains that go on in communities, and we need to focus on those things, not focus on other agendas that don't make sense for the 99% of people in this world.
Yeah, Jason, I'm thinking about this as Jeremy's talking, that one of the conversations we're going to have down the road is, how do we move kids and youth groups from what they are to what he's talking about? And in many ways, how do we move from an entertainment and attractional model of youth ministry to one where kids are really pushed out over the edge to serve? So I like this. I love hearing this. This is great. This is good.
Well, Jeremy, as we kind of turn a corner and come to the end here, I just would love to hear what you're working on, because you are working on another book, and so you've already stirred a movement. So I'm curious what your next book is going to tackle, and what words the Lord's maybe laid on your heart as you've dived into this conversation.
Yeah, the stir movement was a little bit about who I am and why I'm stirring it, and it was a pretty good age level reading from all over, right? It was everywhere from there's some upper end readers that are 10, 11 that can read at a higher level to 70-year-olds that read it. It wasn't really meant for a certain genre of people. This next one is called No Man. It's based on the No Man Shall Live for Yourself thought process, and it just goes a little deeper into what it means to me to be living for other people or being a servant leader. It'll probably even speak to me a little bit, because sometimes we write things because we know it's true. We don't always live it. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how this book comes in. And what it does, it's a lot of my blogs at a little deeper level. So it goes a little deeper into the movement. It has a little bit deeper theology to it, but it goes in, it just expands a little bit more on this no man shall live for himself. What does it truly mean to live for others? And there's a lot of grace built in there. There's not an expectation level that you should live a certain way. There's not like if you're really good, if you're going good with Jesus, then you're going to live at this level. That's not what it is. It's more of my views of what it means to not live for other people, and the reason why I have the tattoo on my forearm, and the reason why it's there, and the reason why it's readable and has to remind me every day, because it is a struggle, but it is a lot on servant leadership and what it means, I think, to serve people that you're involved with, whether it be community, whether it be friendships, whether it be marriages, family, stuff like that.
Wow. Awesome. Well, Jeremy, this has been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. I'm really thankful that you were able to join us. I just want to pass along, we will put links on the CPYU page where the podcast sits. And you mentioned a couple of books that I want to make sure we highlight, which was Bo's Cafe, Hole in the Gospel. But is there any other resources that you would recommend that we've not already mentioned?
And mention your website, your web address.
Yeah,
yeah,
your web address.
Yeah, generationalive.org is our website for the nonprofit. You know what? There's another resource that I think is really, really good, especially for youth workers, and a lot of them probably have already read it to a point. Well, there's two, actually. There's Blue Like Jazz, what I think is one of the greatest books written for youth workers by Donald Miller. There's also a book called The Reason for God by Timothy Keller. And the reason it's a good book is because it actually just gets you an understanding of who he is, and he basically proves God without the Bible. And the concept for me when I read it was the fact that you can't prove Jesus without the Bible, but you can prove God without it. Because the biggest conversation that a lot of youth workers will probably end up having about God is they'll always say, well, the Bible says. And a lot of the conversations that I've had with people will end a lot of times if they say, well, I don't believe the Bible. Well, then where are you going to go? And if we just sit there and say the Bible says, you're not going to relate with a lot of people. And when it comes to a community, there are ways to be able to get people to be interested in who God is so that you can then reflect Jesus onto them. And he does a really good job in this book of kind of tackling some issues that you're going to probably deal with down the road for some thoughts. And a lot of these youth workers are going to start having these thoughts from high schoolers, but even college kids that go away to college and come back and they get kind of challenged by their secular professors and smart guys that are challenging them on God, and they're going to get confused. And this is a book that I really feel helps with a lot of those different issues that these kids are going to get challenged with and they're going to have thoughts about. So those two resources I think are phenomenal.
Great. Well, we'll make those available. Jeremy, thank you. Walt, was there anything that you wanted to be able to add to this?
I'll just say, I'll just remind folks that if they've listened in today and they've picked up the podcast by streaming it through some platform other than our website, cpyu.org, go back to the website, find the podcast page there, and that's where you'll find all these links. So if you're listening through iTunes or somewhere else, we want to make sure you get a chance to click on and through to everything that Jeremy talked about. Jeremy, thanks. This is awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. Well, until next time, we are grateful that you were able to join us, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Thanks for joining us for Youth Culture Matters, a podcast from the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding. If you'd like to learn more about today's youth culture, visit our website at cpyu.org. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, email us at podcast@cpyu.org.